Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, guys. All right, tonight I want to begin by giving you an Old Testament overview. So I want to start talking about the Old Testament and sort of give you an overview of the whole thing. And let's see if I can get that to work here. There we go. You see, there's the Old Testament overview. That didn't come out very well. Well, you might want to take a pen and write this down. The first period of time in the Old Testament is called the primeval period. And the primeval period has four things that characterize it. Number one, it has the creation of man. Is that on there? Number two, it has, are you getting these down? Number two, it has the fall of man. Number three, creation, fall. What's the third one? The flood, and number four is the tower. So that's the first period of time in the Old Testament. It's the primeval time.
Douglas, excuse me. Yes. There's nothing on the wall.
It came out better.
There is.
I have a cool chart.
You're reading from your notes. You didn't give a handout to the people.
I was busy this week.
You're boring. It stinks. I could do better in my sleep, Douglas. We're starting the Old Testament challenge. What are you doing?
I had a bad week.
Yeah, that is obvious, Douglas. Because we love you, Douglas, I think we should find a better, more creative way to start this Old Testament. I just want you to step down carefully, right down here. Step down, and I want you to come right over here with me, Douglas. You have a seat.
God's story, scene 1. The Genesis.
Help, God, we messed up already.
In the beginning, there was nothing but God. And so God spoke, and there was light. Over the course of 7 days, God created all things. The earth, animals, fish, an entire universe, and finally a man, created to be like himself.
Not bad.
But God saw that the man was lonely, and so he created a woman to be his companion.
Not bad.
Everything was perfect. God had provided the man and woman everything they needed, and they were in a relationship with him just as he planned. Until one day...
Hey, girlfriend.
Who, me?
No, I'm talking to the other only woman on the whole planet. Yes, you.
What's up?
Well, I was just wondering. You and that dude you hang out with seem to have it pretty good around here, but I noticed you never eat from this tree here. What's up with that?
Well, God's just given us this one rule that we can't eat from that tree. And he says if we do, then we'll die.
Oh, please, get out of here. For eating one piece of fruit, you won't die. Are you telling me that you've got the run of the whole world here, but you're scared to eat from one little tree?
Okay, I'm not scared.
Uh-huh.
I am not chicken.
Ho, ho, ho.
What?
So prove it.
Oh!
Hey, Eve, what's happening? Boy, am I hungry. I didn't eat. Hey, let me have some of that, will you? Oh!
They had broken the one rule that God had given, and as a result messed up a perfect relationship with the perfect God. They were banished from the Garden of Eden and had to spend their days laboring for the food that had once been provided for them. Time passed, and Adam and Eve had 2 sons. Abel was a shepherd.
Howdy.
And Cain was a farmer.
Ooh, my heart's been doing so good. You know, nice and fat and healthy like over here. And you know, I just got God to thank for that. I think I'm going to give him an offer to my best sheep. That's short of pleasing.
Yeah, my crops are just great, just great. I just love standing out here in the hot sun all day. Thanks, God. Yeah, I suppose I should give him an offering, too. What are you looking at? Hey, don't be thinking I'm giving God any of my best stuff.
God was pleased with Abel's sincere offering of his best sheep. But Cain, not so much.
What?
God said to Cain, why are you so angry? You need to get control of that stuff. It's going to lead you to sin.
You are so right. I am so ashamed. 12-step program, gonna get the books, I'm gonna do it all. I'm gonna get a handle on my anger. Yeah, right. Hey, Abel, old buddy, old pal.
Yeah, what's up?
I got this thing. There's this thing out here that I need to show you. Why don't you come
What's
see
that?
this thing with me? Oh, this is amazing. It's a thing that you're not
Okay,
gonna
let's
believe
go,
this
let's
thing.
go. What's
It
this?
is just an incredible
What is this thing?
It's just unbelievable.
Oh, that thing!
Yeah, this thing.
So Cain killed Abel, and the first murder had been committed. From then on, things didn't get much better. Man continued to get more and more evil and grow further and further apart from God. And that relationship that God once had with his people, his very reason for creating them, was long gone. So God decided to start over. He brought a huge flood onto the earth, destroying everyone in the world except one man's family, whom he shut into the boat with 2 of every animal.
They weren't dead. They just wish they were from the smell.
Noah's family was saved from the flood and got busy repopulating the earth. Scene 2, the promise. Time passed, and even though God had shown with the flood that he meant business, most people ignored him and continued to sin. But a few people really tried hard to follow him, and one such person was a man named Abraham.
Abraham,
What's going on? Who's there?
it's me, God.
Oi, I don't believe it. God is talking to me. What have I done that you honor me?
You have obeyed me, and so I make a promise to you. I will give you more descendants than the stars in the sky. I will make a nation of people out of you, and they will be my people.
God, this is wonderful, but where am I going to put all these people? You say I have this one-bedroom apartment.
I will give you a land of your own. I will show you a wonderful land that I will give your descendants. You will defeat all those who live in this land if you trust and obey me. It will be a land flowing with milk and honey.
Sounds sticky.
And now go.
And so the promise was made, a promise that showed God's faithfulness time and again, even though it would be a while before it actually happened. Time passed, and Abraham and Sarah gave birth to a son. God came to Abraham and told him he wanted him to sacrifice Isaac for a test. Abraham was just about to go through with it when an angel stopped him.
No, wait! God just wanted to test your obedience to him. You passed.
Don't do that to me.
More time passed, and Isaac had 2 kids of his own, 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau had an argument over a trick that Jacob played on Esau. Fearing for his life, Jacob ran away to a place called Haran. Jacob eventually had 12 sons of his own, one of whom was named Joseph. Now, the story of Joseph and his brothers is well known, so we're going to kind of fast forward through some of this. Jacob loved Joseph the most and gave him a special colored coat. The brothers hated Joseph and sold him into slavery. Joseph worked for a guy named Potiphar, but got thrown into prison when Potiphar's wife hit on him. Pharaoh was disturbed by some very weird dreams and heard of a guy in prison who could interpret dreams. Joseph told Pharaoh that his dreams meant there was a famine coming throughout Egypt, and in 7 years there would be no food. Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of Egypt, and Joseph stockpiled food for the time of famine, saving Egypt. Joseph's whole family joined him in Egypt during the famine. Years passed, and Joseph's family got larger and larger. This is where God's promise to Abraham began to come true. Remember, Abraham was Joseph's great-grandfather. Eventually, Joseph died, but his family kept getting larger and larger. A new Pharaoh came into power who didn't remember Joseph or liked the fact that all these Israelites were in Egypt. He enslaved them all, but they just kept on multiplying until there were about 2 million of them. The Pharaoh decided to put an end to the Israelites once and for all. He decreed that any Hebrew boys born during that time would be put to death. It was at about this time that Moses was born. Ta-da! Scene 3, the Exodus. Or enter Moses, exit us. You get it? Ah, good, good. Anyway, it was about this time that Moses was born. It was about this time that Moses was born.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Moses. Okay, here's the deal. I grew up a prince, kind of killed a guy accidentally on purpose, and, well, I ran away to Midian out of fear.
Welcome to Midian, land of mystery and adventure, home of the finest merchandise this side of the Red Sea. Sir, can I interest you in
No, thanks. So here I am in Midian. I get married. I become a shepherd. Life is good. Then God speaks to me from a burning bush. Tells me I got to go back to Egypt and tell old Pharaoh to let the Israelites free from slavery.
Moses, you must be joking.
So here I am.
I will never let your people go.
Tough luck on you, Pharaoh, because God's going to rain his power down on you.
And to make a long story short,
Too late.
he did.
Let the plagues begin. Blood in the Nile.
Frogs. Ribbit, ribbit.
Flies.
Gnats.
Dead livestock.
Boils.
Hail.
Locusts.
Darkness.
And finally, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt.
Israelites, if we take the blood of a lamb, an unblemished lamb, and put it on the doorposts tonight, when the angel of death passes, our firstborn will be spared.
And God did spare them.
Moses, my son is dead. Take your people and go.
430 years of slavery. Finished. Hey, let's get out of here before Pharaoh changes his mind. Come on, Israelites.
And everything was going great.
We're following the leader, the leader, the leader. We're following the leader wherever he may go.
For about the first 5 minutes.
Moses, why'd you take us this way? The Red Sea's blocking our escape. Pharaoh's changed his mind. Now his army's charging down on us. I wish I was back in Egypt.
I wish I'd never followed you.
I wish I was dead.
Enough whining.
There you go.
And so God allowed Moses to part the Red Sea, leading the Israelites through on dry ground. But the Egyptians were destroyed as the water filled back in. Over that next year, many things happened as the Israelites wandered in the desert toward the land that God had promised Abraham, that place that had come to be known as the Promised Land. God gave them the 10 Commandments,
Here they are.
which they immediately began disobeying.
Aye.
They complained that they were hungry.
We're hungry.
So God gave them manna from the sky. They complained that they were thirsty.
We're thirsty.
So God gave them water from a rock. They got sick of manna.
We don't like manna.
So God gave them quails.
Tastes
Tastes like chicken.
And this is how it went for the year that it took to get to the Promised Land. The Israelites were disobedient and whiny. And God continued to forgive and provide until at last they arrived at the Promised Land.
God has promised us this land. A land flowing with milk and honey.
Moses, that's great, but does it have to be milk and a little lactose intolerant?
And I'm allergic to bees.
Quiet! I have sent spies into the land, and they will tell us what they find there.
I'm back.
What'd you find?
There are many people living in these lands.
What?
And they're huge!
What?
They'll make very dangerous enemies.
Oh, great. That's just great.
We never get anything we want.
I wish I was back in Egypt.
I wish I never followed you.
I wish I was dead.
That's it! God has promised you this land, and yet you have done nothing but complain and whine since we started out, ignoring God and his promises. When will you believe him? Mashugana!
And so God, who had led the Israelites to the promised land, punished them. They were forced to wander the desert for the next 40 years. None of those who saw God's wonders in Egypt ever got to see the promised land.
Oh, man.
Including Moses.
Oh, man!
And to make a long story short,
Too late.
40 years passed. Scene 4, wandering in the desert.
Or, was this the origin of the phrase, sand trap?
Moses died, and God chose a new leader for the Israelites named Joshua.
Hi there.
Joshua was humble
Hi there.
and led the Israelites well. At last, it was time to re-enter the promised land. Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land, and this time they were ready to trust God and do this whole thing his way.
Listen up, Israelites. Come on. Now, there are many people living in this land who will try to stop us from moving in.
Didn't we make a reservation?
Pay attention! Now, as long as we obey God, we will defeat them. But if we disobey, we'll have trouble.
And that was the way it worked. When they obeyed God and did things his way, nobody could stop them.
Yay!
But when they let sin into the picture or disobeyed God, even the wimpiest of enemies could beat them. And in this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan. When they obeyed, they won.
Yay!
When they disobeyed, they lost. They won some.
Yay!
They lost some. Sometimes they...
Get the picture.
Okay. Where was I? Help me out here.
In this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan, the promised...
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And in this way, they eventually took over the most of Canaan, the promised land. Scene 5, entering the promised land.
Or milk and honey.
I thought they said elk and bunnies.
You actually found that funny.
Before his death, Joshua gave the Israelites some instructions.
No. I'm going to die soon.
Die? I didn't even know he was sick.
I'm not sick, I'm old. Any other questions, or can I finish this before I keel over right here? Thank you. Don't forget what God has done after I'm gone. Continue to obey him. One thing he commands you to do. Now that we possess almost all of Canaan, you must go around and defeat the few remaining groups of people that live in this land.
Do we have to?
Yes, you schmutzes, you do.
But why?
Because God knows what a bunch of schlemiels you are. The people who still live on the outskirts of this land worship other gods. He wants them gone so this land will be totally dedicated to him. And you won't be tempted to go and worship other gods.
Oh, we wouldn't do that. No, that's never. No.
Now, we promised.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I never heard that before.
And so Joshua died. And to make a long story short,
Too late.
the Israelites ignored God's command to clear out all the other people living in Canaan. Scene 6, the judges.
Or stop the ride. Going in circles like this is making me sick.
The time of the judges was a tricky one for the Israelites. They refused to obey God and clear out all the other people living in Canaan. And because of this sin, more sin followed. They were marrying people they shouldn't have been marrying and following false gods. They pretty much abandoned God. And God allowed them to be captured and taken prisoner by their enemies.
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
Hey, wait a second. Isn't this kind of our fault?
You mean if we defeated our enemies and cleared out the land like God told us to do the first time, none of this would have happened?
Yeah.
God help us! We've been defeated and captured by our enemies!
And so God sent them a leader, a judge, to lead them to victory against the enemies who had captured them.
Woo!
And this is how it went for 325 years. The Israelites would follow and obey God, and he would bless them and give them victory over their enemies. But But then they'd get kind of comfy, forget about God, and God would allow them to be beaten by their enemies. They'd cry out to God for help.
God, help us be defeated and captured by our enemies.
And God would send a new judge to free them. On and on it went like this.
God, help us be defeated and captured by our enemies. Woo! Charge! Hooray! God, help us be defeated and captured by our enemies. Woo! Charge! Hooray!
Enough! Needless to say, they were caught in a terrible cycle of sin. During this time, a few people kept following God, no matter what. People like Boaz,
Howdy.
who was a simple rancher during this time, and Gideon,
Here come the judge.
who was one of the judges God sent to lead the Israelites to victory. But as I said, the cycle of sin and disobedience continued for 325 years. You may wonder, where does it end?
Where does it end? Where does it end?
It ends with scene 7, the kings.
Or, out of the frying pan, into the fry-later.
The last judge during this time was a guy named Samuel. But when he retired, the Israelites started whining again.
We don't want a judge anymore.
We want a king.
The Philistines have a king.
The Amalekites, they have a king.
Why don't we have a king?
We never get anything we want.
When they told this to Samuel, he was furious.
I'm furious. Don't you know what a king will be like? He will take your sons and daughters and make them serve him. Taking care of his horses, cooking his meals, cleaning his palace, fighting in his army. He will take your lands and crops and the food that it produces for himself. You'll be his slaves, practically.
Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Whatever. Read our lips.
We want a king, and we want him now.
So God gave them a king. He knew this would not solve everything, but he figured they're going to have to learn the hard way. During this time, there were many kings. First, King Saul. King Saul was a pretty good king for a while, but then he slipped into sin and disobedience. So God replaced him with David. What?
Bye-bye.
You heard me. David was a very good king, and during his rule, the Israelites finally seemed to be on track, following God and being obedient. Now, don't get me wrong. David had his share of mess-ups like that Bathsheba thing.
Oh, do we always have to go there?
But overall, David had a great rule and was known for being a man after God's own heart. David set up the city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and God promised David that his son would be the one to build the temple and that David's family would rule forever.
Yes!
So David dies.
What? I just got out of here.
David dies. And Solomon became king.
Whatever.
Solomon was a great king and did build the temple.
That's right. Solomon's in the house. Solomon's in the house. Get you with it.
But in the end, he blew it all.
Oh, man.
By disobeying God and worshiping other false gods, Solomon set off a chain reaction
Chain reaction in the house.
that led to Israel's ruin.
I did all that?
Yes.
No.
After Solomon's death, a kind of civil war broke out between the north and the south of Israel.
North leads the rest because the south is second best. Go north.
Oh, Ahmed, you know what time it is.
It's time to get a fresh towel.
No, it's time for the perfect shirt.
You are so right. Oh, yeah. Who's the Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me.
Who's the Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me.
Uh-huh.
Northern Israel, we don't want to hear it. Because we're the Israelites with the most spirit.
So go back north and shut your mouth. The coolest Jews come from the south. Let us be right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Israel was split as a result of Solomon's sin, just as God had warned. Both kingdoms, the north, and the south,
Some spirit rest.
were led by king after king after king after king, almost all bad kings. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until...
Wait a second.
Yes, Solomon?
What about God's promise to my dad that our family would rule forever and ever? I mean, these bad kings weren't from our family.
It's Jesus. Jesus is the king from your family who will rule forever.
Jesus?
I'm getting to it. Do you mind? You're supposed to be dead.
Sorry?
Now, where was I?
Further and further.
Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until scene 8, the exile.
Or will be back.
During the time of the kings, God had sent prophets to warn the people. These men were sent by God to speak for him, warning people away from sin.
Please, folks, back away from the sin. There's nothing to see here. Please move away from the sin and back toward the God of your ancestors. I am a trained professional. I know what I'm doing. Back to your obedient lives, citizens.
But no dice. Nothing worked. God brought the ruin on Israel that he had told Solomon he would. Northern Israel was attacked by a country called Assyria. They were captured and hauled off to Assyria as slaves and servants. Southern Israel, now called Judah, was
Who's the
attacked.
country that's the best?
Judah, it's Judah.
Who's that country that's the best?
It's Judah, it's Judah.
Do you mind?
Sounds me wrong.
Judah was attacked by a country called Babylon. They too were captured and hauled off to Babylon as slaves and servants. During this time, lots of interesting stuff happened.
In the news today, a man named Isaiah, claiming to be a prophet of God, announced that there's coming a day soon when God will be sending a deliverer. The man said, and I quote, "Unto us a child will be born, unto us a son will be given, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Unquote. For more on this story, 5 o'clock.
Apparently, 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bubblegum, were thrown into a fiery furnace today and survived. More at 11.
In a spectacular story today, a man named Daniel is thrown into a den of lions and survives. That and other stories coming up at 5 o'clock.
In today's top story, Queen Esther, Queen of Persia, wife of King Xerxes, saves all the Jews in Persia from annihilation.
Reports confirm that 50,000 Jews returned to Jerusalem today. These Jews and their families were taken captive over 70 years ago by the Babylonians. These Jews are now the first to return to their homeland. A spokesman for the Jews does confirm that they do plan on rebuilding the temple, and the rest of the city still lies in ruins.
And so it went. The Jews had been exiled from their homeland, but even as captives in these foreign countries, God still used his people. Time passed, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
70 years after they were taken captive, the first of them began to make their way home. There was a man named Nehemiah who was still living in Persia at this time. When reports came back from Jerusalem that the city was in ruins, he was heartbroken.
I'm heartbroken, King Artaxerxes. You must let me go and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem.
What are you, nuts?
No, with the wall destroyed, the enemies of my people will be free to attack, and Jerusalem might be taken again. I must go and rebuild so that my God will be honored.
All right, go.
And Nehemiah leads us to scene 9, the return to Jerusalem.
Or deja vu, I feel like I've been here before.
Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem with the help of King Artaxerxes and rallied the Jews to begin rebuilding the wall.
Okay, everybody, we're going to build this wall. And God is really going to be honored. The city will be strong, and all of God's people will be free to return at last.
And so the Jewish people worked and worked. Around the clock they worked. They faced much opposition. Enemies of the Jews tried to stop them, and they carried their swords in one hand and their tools in the other.
Wrong hand, Charlie. Hammer's in your other hand. There you go.
But despite the opposition they faced, they rebuilt the entire wall around the city of Jerusalem in 52 days. Woohoo! During the rebuilding of the walls, Nehemiah became governor, and he led the people in an amazing thing.
The time has come, my friends, to recommit ourselves to God and to following his ways. We have returned to the promised land, the land promised to Abraham. God has brought us home, and we must now return to being his people and living in his way.
And in a way that happened. The people recommitted themselves to God and to living in his ways for the first time in many years. They didn't get it perfect, but it was closer than it had been for a very long time.
Years passed, 400 of them to be exact. There's not much recorded of what took place during that time.
We do know that somewhere in that time, Rome, who was traveling about the world conquering cities, came in and conquered Jerusalem. They didn't enslave the people, but they did put a Roman king there, and he pretty much ran the place. His name was Herod.
Not much else happened during that time. The Jews went about their lives, as did the rest of the world, following God, but still not knowing what it was like to be in that perfect relationship that he designed in the beginning.
Until one silent night, the cry of a newborn baby was heard from the depths of a filthy Bethlehem stable.
But that's the rest of the story. After all, a good writer always leaves room for a sequel.